Hello, my name is Pasquale and I'm with Losurdo Foods, and today I'll be teaching you how to make fresh mozzarella from Bel Capri fresh mozzarella curd cheese. Okay, this curd cheese is a whole milk product made from pasteurized grade A milk. And what I'm going to do is take this 10-pound piece of curd cheese and actually slice this in half. Then I'm going to take this half and slice that into half and then into quarters. Then I'm going to take these pieces that I cut into quarters and slice this piece into a third. And then do the same for the other side. And push it through this cheese slicer so that when you do begin the cooking process, you can ensure that everything gets heated up nice and evenly. It's always nice to work in smaller batches initially when you're getting started to become acclimated with the entire process. Okay, to the right of me I have water that has been heated to about 175 degrees. I'm adding the water around the bowl a little bit at a time, as opposed to directly on top of the curd cheese. This is allowing this bowl to pick up some of that water temperature and slowly disperse it. And I'll continue to add this water in this manner until the curd cheese is completely covered. Okay, at this point here I'm going to take my paddle out, and all I'm going to do is give this curd cheese a gentle stir. And all this is doing is further ensuring an even distribution of water temperature throughout the bowl. And at the same time I'm trying to keep these individual pieces of curd cheese separated so they absorb the heat on an equal basis. And we're just going to allow this cheese to rest for a couple minutes. And what you just seen here is what we call the first cook. And as I explained to you before, it's more of a tempering of the cheese, a warming of the cheese, getting it ready for the second cook. Let me explain to you what these other two bowls will be utilized for. The bowl to my left has ordinary cold tap water, and that will be utilized to stop the cooking process of the mozzarella and help it retain its shape, since I'm going to give my mozzarella a definite shape. The bowl to my right has a salt brine solution, and that's going to be utilized to further enhance the flavor of the mozzarella if I choose to salt it. Okay, the curd has been rested for about 5 minutes. Now we can begin the second cook. And what I'm going to do now is simply discard about 2/3 of this water. And all I'm going to do now is simply reintroduce some of that water that was heated to 175 degrees into the bowl once again. Once again, I'm going to add the water slowly back into the bowl and around the bowl as opposed to directly on top of this curd cheese. And once again, I'm going to completely submerge this cheese under the hot water. Just giving a gentle press to one side. Then I'm going to take my paddle and I'm going to insert it underneath this curd cheese. And working in a rotary direction, I'm going to start to stretch this cheese over this paddle. In doing so, I'm just pulling a small amount of cheese at a time over this paddle. And as you can see, the surface area of the cheese is starting to increase, and I'm exposing this cheese to warmer temperatures. Now, if you noticed, I started folding this cheese, and the reason why I'm folding this cheese is to achieve a nice even texture throughout this cheese. And the way I go about doing it is simply tuck and fold and create a new outer edge by pulling this cheese outward. Now all you want to do here is develop a nice smooth tender texture to the cheese, and it should have a nice smooth, almost silky feel to it, or dough-like feel to it. And once I develop the texture of the cheese, all that's left for me to do is to take this cheese out of the water and give it a gentle stretch. And as you can see, it's pretty much stretching on its own. Just the weight of the cheese is allowing this cheese to stretch, and it's almost taking on a taffy-like consistency. Place it back in the water, and now I could begin shaping. Just like pasta, mozzarella comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes, and I'm going to try to identify some of the shapes and sizes today. So working from one end of this curd cheese, I'm going to shape up my first mozzarella. And the first mozzarella I'm going to make is an egg-shaped mozzarella called an ovalini. All I'm doing is tucking this cheese inside of itself, developing a nice smooth surface to this cheese. And then once I have a desired amount of cheese, I simply fold this cheese together, apply a little bit of a tourniquet to it, and a little pinch, and we have our first mozzarella. So working with this last piece of mozzarella cheese, I'm actually going to place this in the pan, and I'm going to open this up just as you would making a pizza. Okay, then we're going to take some prosciutto that I have pre-sliced there. I'm actually going to start to roll this nice and tightly. And keep pulling it towards you. Then I'm going to add some additional hot water, and this will give me a nice tight seal on this roulade. Once the cheese has been properly set or firmed up, all that's left for me to do is to transfer these over to the salt brine. So here you see your braid going into the salt brine. your egg-shaped mozzarella, which is the ovalini. We have our scamozza going into the brine. Then we have our string cheese braid. And then we have our basket mozzarella going into the brine. The last thing I'm going to put into the brine is this mozzarella and prosciutto roulade. Now I'm not going to leave that in there too long because obviously the prosciutto has quite a bit of salt to begin with. So I'm going to take it out, and I feel that's sufficient amount of salt. I want to show you how nicely, once I slice through this roulade, we'll have a pinwheel effect of prosciutto and mozzarella. So we can just plate this. Cooling and salting. Your larger mozzarellas require more cooling and more salting. Your smaller mozzarellas, and that would be the bocconcinis that I made, or the little knots, require less cooling and less salting. Okay, I think I have all of them. Now these don't require all that much salt, so they're only been sitting in this brine here for about 30 seconds or so, and I feel that's a sufficient amount of salt for these guys. I'm just going to plate them. Now once these mozzarellas have acquired a desired amount of salt, all that's left for me to do is simply wrap them. So we're going to use a small amount of stretch wrap. Then place your good side down on the wrapper and simply wrap this cheese in this stretch wrap. Now the reason why they call it stretch wrap is because it stretches, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to stretch it nice and tightly, nip it at one end and then the other, and then all I'm going to do is spin it around and just tie these two ends. Hey, we had a great time today making fresh mozzarella from Bel Capri fresh mozzarella curd cheese. I would encourage everyone getting started for the first time to take their time, learn the steps, follow the steps, become familiar with all aspects of the process, and you'll have a much more consistent product as an end result.